Good evening, and once again, this time it's Sunday night, and time to go over the week before and the week to come. And I would like to say once again, great job on last week's discussion. It really was lively and very interesting, and I think people engaged with what we were talking about quite a bit. And it really is an interesting question that we had in the discussion board, and was very gratifying to me to see that just one simple question could go so many different ways. But last week we really saw the intersection between law and policy and sport and business structure, and it all came together. And one of the reasons, too, I'd like to mention right now that I chose, once again, the NFL, and a lot of times we will continue with the NFL, is simply because that there's actually a lot more information out there about them, simply because they're so big. They're such the dominant league in this country, and there's just so much material about them. And they are very interesting. And many experts consider them to be probably the example of a well-run sporting operation. That's the best run league in the world, and in many ways it is. But you can see all the different problems we tended to discuss about them. And I think very interesting about the legal structure of the league. We talked about how until just very recently it was organized as a not-for-profit organization. That's simply amazing to a lot of us, but it really was. It's been recognized differently. And going back to Major League Baseball, decades and decades ago, baseball, while not recognized as a not-for-profit, was exempted from the antitrust laws, the anti-monopoly laws, and was actually classified as a public exhibition, not a business. So what that illustrates is how sport has a different perception by many other sectors of the public and of government and of taxing authorities and everything. It's different. And as I said in the beginning, it seems to be sometimes one of the basic principles of economics is rationality, that we make rational decisions. And in sport, things sometimes seem a little irrational, a little different, because sport we get so involved in. And I think these were great examples. So you guys did a great job with that, and you can see how though some things have come in. Look at the NFL example. Is it 32 separate profit-making businesses? Well, yes, it's an association. Now the association is going to act as a for-profit business, and it certainly is extremely profitable. But you can see how sometimes the league acts as the entity, sometimes the clubs act as their own entities. They compete with each other, but without each other, they'd be lost. Without each other, without the league, would any one of those franchises as an independent business be effective at all? And the answer pretty much is no, or at least not as effective as they are. And so you see not only the business purpose of leagues, but you see the competitive purpose of leagues. And some of you in your discussion answers actually anticipated this week's material. We started to get into real briefly in some of your postings discussions of competitive advantage. Okay? But this time we're going to talk about competitive advantage and competitive balance on the field. And that's where we're moving this week. So this week actually can maybe be a little bit more fun, because as much as I've asked you to take off take off your fan hat and look at things like an owner and a policymaker, now maybe we can go back a little bit and think just a little bit like sports fans. But the question this week is, let's look at how competitive balance affects the outcome of the business results. And is competitive balance on the field absolutely necessary for economic success off the field? And we're going to look at many of the different ways we do it. We have different systems in different sports. We look at the draft processes, which are different across different sports. The NBA has its weighted lottery. The NFL does a pure reverse order draft. We look at promotion and relegation in soccer worldwide, a very interesting system. Closed leagues and open leagues. All these things work, but they are working for one purpose, to have the ultimate outcome, okay? Which is success, no matter how you define it. So, let's look at it this week. Look at the different ways that leagues manage to keep competitive balance. Another question I want you to start thinking about is absolute parity. You know, the old line, the NFL wants everybody to be 8-8. Boy, was it good. Parity is great in college basketball. That's what you're seeing coming out in the tournaments. All these kind of questions. Well, is it really what we want? Are dynasties good for sports? Are dominant teams good for sports? Does it help a league, no matter what sport in, to have its best team in its biggest market? Look at what goes on right now. Some of the biggest markets, let's look at the NBA. Biggest markets: Knicks, not so good. Lakers, not so good, right? The Warriors, pretty big market. Best team out there. San Antonio goes out laboring in a small market, maybe the best team consistently year after year for the last 15 years, and we don't think of them in the same economic terms as we see, say, some of the flashier places. So all these things come into effect, and they affect the outcome of the business. So this week we really want to explain the competitive balance, how it's managed in different sports, and what difference does it make on the field. Okay? So that's really where we're going. Once again, I want to reiterate, great job. You're doing wonderfully in bringing in outside materials. The discussions are lively. The discussions are good. The discussions, I love the way you guys question each other. This is the way it's supposed to be. And it gets a little harder every week. It gets a little tougher. Standards go up and up and up. And we're into week 4. And fair warning, what's going to come up, I don't do the midterm in week 4. I do it in week 5. And you'll see it's actually kind of timely, because the midterm this time around is going to be NBA related. And I'll try to introduce it to you later in the week. And without any more to talk about, that's the summary. I'm very happy with what I see. I hope you're having a good time with this, as well as getting something out of it. I did put out a piece, if you didn't notice it, in an announcement earlier this week, right from the NCAA. Many of you talked about the idea of becoming an athletic director, and there's a piece from the NCAA Division II section about what it takes to become an AD. I just thought you might find that a little bit interesting as you contemplate some of the things you want to do with your degree once you get it. And hope things like that are helpful. And when things come up like that and they're timely, I'll fish them out and put them up for you. Okay? So thanks for everything you've worked on this week. Hope next week, I have no doubt that it's going to be just as good, and have some fun with it. Okay, thanks very much.